people, the beautiful people, the beautiful people, the beautiful people. All right, let's start recording this thing. Click record. Oh, that's how I do my vocal warm-ups. I might leave this in. For the Patreon version. But this can be taken out for YouTube. So the context of this joke would be removed. Oh, that's some good stuff. That's your mommy's pussy juice. Shit fires me up. Just kidding. What's up, everybody? Y'all know me. Still the same OG. With a pen and a pad. And I've been low-key. Alright. This video, specifically, was requested by my boy, Tyler Schnabel. He is one of the he's one of the executive producers here on Patreon. Thank you for your support, my dude. North must remember, Breanne Johnson, get in, get y'alls. I'll make a video for you like this. Also, I've got a couple of other topics I've been kind of saving up. I'll include those towards the end. All right, so Jon Snows parentage. All right. In my opinion, Jon Snow's parents are Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, the wolf and the dragon. Yeah, Jon will never fully realize, or care rather, that he's a Targaryen. That's never going to be a thing. Like, in the books, specifically in a Game of Thrones, when Jon wants to leave the wall, so there's a few different times, but specifically after he's been made a steward, and he's like, I don't want to cook and clean and take out shit pots and heat up the blankets for this fucking guy. He's like, I don't want to do that. I'm over it, right? And, he says, what do you take me for, right? Talking to Lord Commander Mormont. And, specifically Bowen Marsh, who's in charge of the stewards. But before the boys say their vowels, to become Night's Watchmen, Jon convinces Maester Aemon to pass Sam from training because Alistair Thorne's going to basically murder them by having Sam beat up all the time. So Sam graduates from that, moves forward, right? He gets made a steward. And when Jon gets made a steward, Jon obviously has a problem with it because stewards, like I said, they keep tallies, they shoe horses, they do everything but fight, right? Jon says, I can ride better than all of you, I can fight better than all of you. What the fuck is happening, right? So then he doesn't say all this, is kind of what he's thinking. But then Aemon steps forward and said, I thought you were a man of the Night's Watch, you fucker. And then Jon's like, well, pouts and kind of walks away, right? But in these moments, a couple other times in Game of Thrones, right? If Jon's parentage is revealed, if Jon's mother, more importantly, is revealed, because Jon doesn't really think about who his dad is. He knows it's Ned Stark. So he kind of never really... It's actually it's an interesting dynamic. He never really misses his father, even though he doesn't know who his dad is. Like, he knows his dad is Ned Stark. He thinks his dad is Ned Stark. He's a bastard of Ned Stark, right? But because he doesn't know what he actually lost, he's not as fucked up as he could be, right? He could be a lot more fucked up. I mean, you can ask anybody who's lost one parent or both parents, which is worse, right? Obviously, the person who said they lost both parents is going to tell you it's worse. My own personal experience, some of my earliest memories are with my mom, right? And I remember my dad coming to visit or her trying to find him because I remember she would always, like, talk shit about him or whatever. But then when he came around, it was after she was already in jail, right? So then I was up in Detroit with my mom's family, and I was like, 4 or 5. So yeah, I missed her, but I didn't really know, I was kind of too young, right? And I was also near everybody that she was always around, so I kind of felt like she was still there. But then when my dad came and got me from Detroit, which is something that I wanted, right? I missed my dad as a kid, right? He came and got us from Detroit, and then I lost my mom in that sense because she wasn't so close. Even though we didn't go visit her in prison, she was still kind of like, within 25 miles. She was in, I think at the time she was in Ann Arbor and we were in Detroit, so maybe an hour, right? But once I got to DC with my dad, I was like, oh fuck, I miss my mom. So from personal experience, I can tell you losing both is worse, right? Because to finish out that story, as I got older, my dad kind of just, as soon as I turned 16, he disappeared. He literally moved at first to go stay with his crackhead girlfriend's house that was maybe like 30 minutes away. Then he moved down to Florida, and he's smoking that Florida crack down there. You know what I mean? I'm making jokes about it, but no, seriously. So I feel like I've lost both my parents. My mom's in jail. My dad's, cracking out. So I can kind of relate to Jon. I'll probably remove that whole rant. That was way too personal. Y'all don't need to know any of that shit. But anyway, Jon Snow doesn't realize that he never knows his dad, right? He does think to himself, who was my mother? Like, why didn't my father stay with her? And, like, referring to Ned, he's, like, thinking, like, why didn't Ned stay with my mom? And then he goes, oh, because she was a whore. Yeah. So it's actually really interesting, when you reread the books. Obviously, Jon Snow's lineage isn't revealed yet in the books, but it's pretty fucking blaringly obvious that his parents are Rhaegar and Lyanna, right? So anyway, the scene that I actually have the image of right here, where Ned tells Jon, the next time I see you, I'll tell you who your mother is, that never happens. I don't even think we get a final scene with Ned and Jon before he leaves to the wall. The scene we get is with Ned and, with Jon and Arya. Jon does wonder why his father never told him who his mother is, but the TV show just kind of wanted to make it more sentimental by saying, like, look, the next time I see you, I'll tell you who your mama is. It's just, let me explain why I think Rhaegar and Lyanna are Jon Snow's parentage. Clues aside, context clues aside. When A Game of Thrones was first brought to, TV executives' attention, so when Dan and Dave had a dinner with George and they wanted to take the pilot, film a pilot, try to sell a pilot to a network, they had a dinner with George to ask him if they could even do that because it's his books, right? George is a big eater, right? So they're eating, Dan and Dave, and they're like, this is like 2006, I think, 2007 maybe. And they're sitting there like, hoda. George is like, ho. Dan and Dave are like, ding, ding, dong. Hell yeah, sure, ha. That's my impression of their banter, right? They're just talking. But then, after they propose the question of like, hey, can we turn your books into the best TV show of all time, right? Still, even after season 8, still the greatest show of all time. George asks them, before he answers them, to say yes, they can move forward with the pilot. He says, who is Jon Snow's parentage? Dan and Dave answered, and guess what? Got it right. So what did Dan and Dave show us on the TV show? It was sort of half-hearted, but the attempt, or what they showed us on screen, is that Jon Snow's parentage are Rhaegar and Lyanna. So the biggest reveal, one of the biggest reveals from the book, it's not even one of the biggest reveals if you're paying attention, right? Is like, sorry, let me rephrase that. One of the, one of the easiest things to sort of get right is Jon Snow's lineage if you're sort of paying attention. Obviously, the books have been out so long, and it's been so long since The Winds of Winter hasn't come out, or, Dance Dragon was released. People have over-analyzed these books. Like, I'm not even joking. That's literally what all it is. That's the reason why there's these other theories that exist about who Jon Snow's lineage, or who Jon Snow is, where he comes from, what his lineage is, right? Who his parents are. That's the only reason. If George thought that would be the safest question to ask these motherfuckers, Dan and Dave, if they actually read his books, who Jon Snow's parentage is, and they said Rhaegar and Lyanna, and clearly they got it right, George is like, he doesn't have any ulterior motives. He's letting us know Jon Snow is Rhaegar's son and Lyanna's son, but really, he's just a Ned Stark 2.0 because he was raised by the man. So he's actually Ned Stark's son. So the whole point R plus L equals J and this and that. It doesn't really matter, because once Jon Snow finds out, or if he finds out who he actually is, it's not going to change who he is on the inside. Like, that was the big debate for the TV show, is like, when Jon finds out that he's half Targaryen, is he going to dye his hair white? No, not that. That wasn't the big question, but the big question was, what is he going to do? You know? And I hadn't read the books when the series was out, so I had a lot of fun with my half mental image of the full story by only watching the TV show. I thought, oh, he's gonna make him more hard. He's gonna become a lean, fighting king, right? But no, that's not the case. He literally just stayed the exact same. If anything, he got quieter. He had less lines, and he don't want it, right? He never wanted it, which actually kind of makes sense in the context, because Jon. Actually, no, that's a flat out lie. That's a fucking lie, because initially he does want it. He does. And then in the end, right, the last book that we have in the Dance of Dragons, he wants it because he convinces a bunch of Night's Watch members to go and usurp the Night's Watch with him, regardless of how you want to put it. And like, oh yeah, the pink letter arrives, and Ramsay Bolton taunted him to come out, and oh, technically, he's the Lord Commander, and he's not saying that he'll never be back to the Night's Watch. He's just saying that right now he's going to do the opposite of what their oaths were, which was that we have no king, we have no leaders, we only worship the protecting the wall, and we are the shields that guards the realms of men. Which, when you think about that line, it's kind of really interesting, because the realms of men would literally be the seven kingdoms. Everything beyond that is no longer the realms of men. That's why there's White Walkers and woodland fairies, aka children of the forest, and giants and ice spiders and all these other creatures. It's because that's the elder race's realms, and the realms of men are the seven kingdoms. And they kind of had to fight the elder races to get those realms. And maybe they had an agreement, the first pact of ice and fire, that for a time these would be your lands, and then eventually they're going to be our lands again, or something like that. And that was just lost to history, and that's why the White Walkers are coming back. But anyway, they're the shields that guards the realms of men, so that means they need to not fucking usurp, which is what Jon did. Jon literally is in the shield hall. He's like, hey guys, come with me. This dude said he's got my sister, and he's got Mance, and you guys think Mance is dead, and really it's Lord of the Bones, because that's who you guys think I sent down there, but that you all don't think really know that that's totally Mance the Raider. Jon has a lisp. I don't know if y'all know this, but it's canon too, because check this out. Jon has a lisp, all right? So when he is eating Ygritte's pussy, Ygritte actually has teeth down there. So Jon's, licking the cotton, and then she bites his tongue with her, as George calls it, nether lips. So from that point forward, Jon has a bleeding tongue. The wound never heals. So when he talks, he kind of sounds like Biter from the audiobooks. Roy Dochi's audio voice for Biter. That's who he sounds like he's, or Tywin. He's got wooden teeth. Clack, clack, clack. Tywin, I'm Tywin. It's you think like, oh, you mean Tywin? No, it's this dude at the wall who is really good at knowing the forest. He's a ranger. His name's Tywin, and he clacks his wooden teeth. But anyway, so that's how I feel. Jon Snow's lineage, although it is really cool as a reader to find out who this hero's bloodline is, it ultimately doesn't matter. That's George's whole point, is it doesn't matter, because he's so, he knows because he wrote it, but he's so cemented in Jon's chapters who he is, explain the journey that he's on, and who, he's become. Ultimately, you can't really say he doesn't want it, because he literally is going to go down south of the... Or as soon as Melisandre brings him back, he's going to go help Stannis at the Battle of the Bastards, and there's going to be, kind of a similar situation to what happened on the TV show, minus the fact that Breanne is going to kill Stannis. That's not going to happen. So yeah, I mean, not to sound like a party pooper, my boy Tyler, if you're watching this right now, I told you it was going to be biased. Hopefully I've convinced you There's no, like, even if, okay, so let's entertain some of the other ideas, and I'm going to talk about the wolf stand, because I know that's specifically what you wanted, and the annotations from the iBook versions. But I actually, let me pause right there. Those annotations aren't George's words per se. I believe there's someone from his, like, assistance group, and then also Elio and Linda, who wrote his co-authors. Those annotations are from them, and I think they were mostly for people, like when they re-released the remastered versions with the annotations included for the iBooks. I think those were more for people who were coming over from watching the show, and it's hard for them to keep up with all these names and dates and locations in the book, so those annotations were included. I don't know if they're direct verbatim George's words, so I'll have to make another video once I buy those versions on iBook. Like, I have the physical books and then the audiobooks on Audible, but I don't have that version. I have read a couple of them, and it is kind of interesting, but also, like I mentioned, from my research, I don't think those are George's actual words. So it is interesting, but it's not to be taken with serious canon, because they're not, like, things that he thought to add or wrote. It's just, like, kind of the fandom adding context to what's happening in that situation. But I could be completely wrong. That's just from what I've researched and the clips that I've seen from the Game of Thrones version of the remastered. But anyway, getting back on track here, if we entertain the other ideas of who Jon Snow's parents are, it still doesn't matter. The person that raised him, the person that he is, the person that he's going to become, the person that he's going to constantly think about morally if he's doing the right thing, like what would this person do, is going to be Ned. So Jon Snow's lineage, Jon Snow's parentage doesn't matter. Like, it's Rhaegar and Lyanna, in my opinion. It could be Ned and Ashara, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. It could be Ashara and Brandon Stark. It could literally be Benjen, because Benjen tells Jon, there's a moment where Benjen and Jon are arguing at Winterfell, and Benjen tells Jon, "Father a few bastards, then come holler at me," right? Like, Benjen's basically saying that, like, one of the things you do to become a man is, like, grow up, right? Get some hair on your chest, get some bass in your voice, but also get some hair on your nuts, but also fuck some bitches, father some bastards, have sex. That's, like, what Benjen is telling Jon he hasn't done yet. Benjen's like, bro, you're saying you're willing to give up pussy, but you never had pussy. So how the fuck do you know what you're giving up if you ain't never had it, dumbass, right? So this is what Benjen is telling Jon, right? Before Jon wants to be a little dumbass and run to the wall. So, in the conversation, the idea is kind of like, Breanne sees Benjen and Lyanna practicing sword fighting, and Lyanna beats the shit out of Benjen. She splashes him, knocks him down, hits him in a river, and Benjen starts crying, and Lyanna tells Benjen, "Stop, you little bitch. Old man's gonna hear you, and then father will come out. Then we'll get in trouble for me beating you up." Right? The idea, you could propose that Benjen and Lyanna were really close growing up, and Lyanna was already pregnant with Benjen's baby when Rhaegar stole her away, so Rhaegar potentially could have known that that's a bastard baby, and, like, if people found out about it, they would be some type of way. Or maybe Lyanna doesn't tell Rhaegar, and Rhaegar thinks it's his, and Jon Snow's really Lyanna and Benjen's, right? Like, it doesn't matter, but that could totally be the case. That's a crazy tinfoil theory. Excuse my burp. But it doesn't matter. It's besides the point. Jon is who he is. He's going to be Ned 2.0, a better version of Ned. He'll play the game better, right? He's obviously off to a shitty start because he's dead. So is Ned, but also he's going to be brought back. I'm trying to think, like, is there a special, if Jon Snow's mother, if it is someone other than Lyanna, it just isn't, because Jon looks like Ned, and Ned looks like Arya, and Arya looks like Lyanna, and you can circular back to that Jon looking like Lyanna. But if there is, and it's Ashara and Ned, well, then Jon still kind of has the same lineage that he would have had if his father was Rhaegar, because Ned Stark is of the North, he's of the Old Blood, and the Danes of House Dane of Starfall, like, literally the rumors, the history, the lore is that the first founding member of House Dane followed a falling star to Starfall, which is their location, their seat of power, and found this magical sword Dawn. Jon Snow was supposedly born underneath the Dawn, the blade that Ned was carrying back. Right before that, Ned kills the Sword of the Morning, Sir Arthur Dayne, who's the greatest swordsman who ever lived, right? On the TV show, he was a dual wielder, right? Ned kills him, and then you would assume that the legend goes that Ned carried Arthur Dayne's sword back to Starfall, and this is where he ran into Estrada, and this is where Estrada kills herself by jumping off of the tower, right? The Danes have similar features to the Valyrians of old, so they probably descend from the original dragon riding race that had white hair, purple eyes, because that's how the Danes look, right? The golden white hair. So if that blood thing does matter, and Jon Snow's mother is Estrada and his father's actually Ned Stark, does it change anything? No, it doesn't. You could do that with almost any. Benjen and Lyanna, does it change Jon Snow? No, because he was raised by Ned. Rhaegar and Lyanna, does it change who Jon Snow is? No, because he was raised by Ned. Robert Baratheon and Lyanna, does it change anything? No, because he was raised by Ned. Like, that's the craziest theory ever. And it definitely didn't happen because Robert never hooked up with Lyanna, but also Robert does have bastards all over the place. Like, there's some people that think Renly is one of Robert's bastards because Renly was so young when Robert's rebellion broke out that it's possible that Robert could have fathered more than, Maya Stone, the bastard that he has in the Vale. Like, Robert's got bastards potentially, everywhere. Oh, yeah, here's some interesting stuff, interesting theory. And I'll get back to it. But remember, my whole point is that it doesn't matter. Jon's going to be Ned 2.0, just better, right? Maybe a stronger claim to the Iron Throne. Obviously, Ned never had a claim. But there is this fucking whore at Chataya's that is... I forget her name. Is it like Biersey or Bursay or something like that? It's really close to Cersei's name, but she's got yellow hair and green eyes, and she can read, and Tywin has a tunnel built from the Tower of the Hand to the whores' houses, to brothels. So, obviously, and the fact that he's sleeping with Tyrion's girlfriend, Shae, Tywin was whoring, a big whore, so he probably has a couple of bastards. One of them is this bitch who can read, who's a whore in Chataya's, and she's described as having those green eyes, right? Tywin's eyes are green, but they have flecks of gold in them. That's why I got confused there. But potentially, and I'm going to say that for another video, Tywin has that bitch as a bastard. And there's this other dude at the wall. I think is he a ranger? I forget his name, but he also is described as having yellow hair and green eyes, and his name literally sounds like Lan or Lannister or Tywin. Like, it's interesting. But anyway, there is some context that I'm leaving out, but the whole point of this was to prove that Jon Snow's lineage doesn't actually matter. But there's some context that I'm leaving out, right? When Ned Stark is trying to sneak into the north, so let me start at the beginning. You gotta realize that Ned was never supposed to marry Catelyn. Ned was actually, from the tourney at Harrenhal, from what the context we're giving, in love with the Shara. So there's a strong chance that because Ned never really thought he was going to be marrying Catelyn, and he hadn't necessarily been promised to someone yet, he thought that maybe Ashara would potentially be a good match. He was in love with her, right? So there's this idea that Ned, in Davos's POV, after Stannis sends him away to go and get him an army, basically, Davos is tasked with trying to go get Wyman Manderly's fleet of ships and his army to join Stannis' side when Stannis is sort of trying to win the North. He goes and helps out the Night's Watch, and then he goes and gets the Mountain Clan members to join his side. And then he also is trying to, save Winterfell, right? So in the process of trying to do this, he sends Davos out to go and get him some more forces. Like, remember what Davos does for Jon when he's Jon Sand the King? He has to go to all these different locations and try to convince people to join Jon's side. This is what Stannis sends him to go do, and he goes and meets with this dude. On his way to meet with Wyman Manderly, he meets with this fellow at the Three Sisters. Now, when he first meets with the dude, he's sort of unaware of what he will be, like how he will be received, if it will be hostile or if it will be friendly, right? So when he eventually does meet with this dude, it's really interesting. George does the thing that he does with food, where he describes some soup that I would have never thought would be delicious, but the way he describes it made me want to try some. It's like a crab bisque, but it's got 3 meats in it or some shit, and it's really good. It's delicious. It's super hearty. Davos eats some. So he's talking with the Lord of the Three Sisters, which is like this little trek of islands in between the north and trying to get to White Harbor and stuff, where he was at the wall, right? He's making his way down south. And this dude tells him the story. Basically, the whole context of it is the dude from the Three Sisters is telling Davos this story because it relates to Davos' situation, which is Davos is trying to get the dude from the Three Sisters and Wyman Manderly to pledge their allegiance to Stannis, but right now, sitting the Iron Throne is not Stannis. Stannis isn't sitting the Iron Throne. It's Tommen, a.k.a. Cersei. A.k.a. it was Joffrey, but he's dead, so it's really Cersei. And Cersei was just walk of shame, atonement, but she's back, right? So Tommen's on the Iron Throne. So ultimately, that's what the Three Sisters dude is trying to say to Davos by telling him this story that I'm about to tell you, right? So he basically, his whole point is that we stay neutral. Whichever king is on top, that's who we support, right? But you guys are doing your war, so he's kind of saying we're going to blind eye this, right? So he tells Davos this story of Ned Stark. When Robert's Rebellion first breaks out, obviously King Aerys the Mad King is the one on the Iron Throne, but he's the Mad King. Nobody really likes him, right? So Robert's Rebellion, if Robert loses, the dude from the Three Sisters doesn't want anything to happen to him. So when Ned Stark shows up there with this fisherman's daughter who secretly could be Ashara, supposedly Ned gets the fisherman's daughter pregnant. Ned has a thing with Ashara. Ashara finds out that Ned's betrothed to Catelyn and kills her so that's why a lot of people think this fisherman daughter that Ned is trying to sneak back into the North with is actually Ashara Dane. So when he shows up at the Three Sisters, he sort of propositions the dude like, yo, help me. And the guy's like, well, fucking, you're fighting an open rebellion. I didn't see you. I'm going to help you, but I didn't see nothing. I know nothing kind of thing. So it's mentioned that Ned ends up getting this fisherman's daughter who he used to take a boat out to the Three Sisters, right? She's pregnant, and like you can kind of take that how you want, that Ned comes back with the baby shortly thereafter, that after getting this fisherman's daughter pregnant who could potentially be Ashara Dane, taking on the guise of someone else because maybe her and Ned were trying to run away. Like, there's that whole thing. But like I said, even if that's the case, and Jon Snow's mother really is Ashara Dane and his father is still Ned, it's still, it's the same. Jon's going to be who he is, which is Ned Stark 2.0. I think that's the whole point of George writing the story like this, because the TV show does a really good job of building up the reveal to Jon Snow's lineage of like what it's amazing. Jon's gonna ride a dragon. Well, he did that on the TV show, but you think like when Jon finds out this information that he's half Targaryen or he's half Dane, he'll try to become the Sword of the Morning, or he'll try to ride a dragon, or he'll try to do something outside of what his storyline and where his storyline is going, and that's just non-factual. It's put in there to make us think as a reader, to get excited only to be let down. But that's the whole point of George's story, right? The whole time we're reading Game of Thrones, we're like, man, this Ned Stark dude is a sick-ass player. He's doing the right thing. Like, yeah, he has Littlefinger going by the gold cloaks for him, but ultimately, like, he's going to be the man. And then guess what? He fucks up. He gets locked up. He goes into the throne room to try to get Cersei to, bend the knee, so to speak, and he gives her many chances to run away, and she doesn't. And like, when the first time you're reading that, if you've never seen the TV show, you're like, oh, this is about to go down. Ned's got a broken leg, but not to worry. He's got his best men with him. He bought the City Watch. The Gold Cloaks are with him. The way George describes the Kingsguard, they're really intimidating, but also ultimately there's not as many of them as the City Watchmen in the Iron Throne in the room. Ned thinks about when the first time he went to the Iron Throne room, it was on horseback, and it was when Jaime was sitting on the Iron Throne, and he had to get Jaime to get off the Iron Throne because Jaime was holding the sword he killed the Dragon King, Mad King with, So it's just a really, really good scene. But ultimately, when you're sucked in the story and you're reading that, you're like, damn, I did not see that coming. So, like, you expect Ned to do something to get out of that situation, but then you don't see it coming, and it kind of doesn't matter because he ends up dying at the end. And what's really interesting is, like, after that chapter, after that POV with Ned towards the end of Game of Thrones where he gets locked up, the very next chapter is with Arya, and it starts with Arya having the lesson with Syrio Forel, and he's like, duck, move, right? So it's like... he does something and tricks Arya, like he's telling her left, right, left, and that's where she's supposed to block from because that's where the blows are coming. So Syrio Forel switches up and he says left, but he hits her right, and he goes, there goes your head, little girl. And it's interesting because Ned's gonna lose his head. George, you're a sick fuck, dude. But yeah, it's also a genius, So that's a good part. It's 30 minutes on that. Like I said, my boy Tyler, if I get those annotations, when I get them, when I buy the iBook version and I reread those, I will make videos on the annotations. But like I said, from my research, I don't think those are actually what George, I don't think those are actually George's words. And this was actually 31 minutes. Holy shit. I'm going to wrap this video up right here. I'll upload this right now to Patreon. Thank you. Thank you for your support. If this does make it to YouTube, thank you for watching. Please slap a like on this. Please subscribe. Alonat zaltrizas pustari ixos. Dahor.